Kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan Tokawingo, and welcome to this IT Professionals Fireside Chat. It's fantastic to see you all here today. Now, I was meant to be joined by Kendra Ross for this to talk about all things cybersecurity, but Kendra has come down ill overnight, and she very kindly found a substitute for herself after having to cancel with us previously. And today I'd like to welcome Nadia Yousef along to this fireside chat for IT professionals members. Welcome.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me here today.
That's so cool. And I love that you've got a Christmas tree in the background.
I must say, when I read that it was a fireside chat, I was a bit disappointed because we actually ripped our fireplace out a few weeks ago. So I thought, well, the Christmas tree probably still has a similar feeling. So we'll make it work.
Fair enough. And Christmas tree is a great accessory. So Nadia, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do in the cybersecurity space?
Sure. So I'm Nadia Yousef. I work for CISO-Lens. CISO-Lens is a company that's mostly based in Australia, and it's made to bring chief information security officers or equivalent titles together to kind of share information, opportunities, just what they're sort of seeing in their landscape. And that company grew and it developed in New Zealand as well. So we've got a group of about 80-ish CISOs in Australia and about 25 in New Zealand. And we do operate as an information sharing center as well, which is quite wonderful. So before that, I was the incident response manager at CERT New Zealand. I was there for about 5 years. And before that as well, I was with the NCSC.
Great. So you've got a good grounding and background for the questions I'm going to ask you today.
I hope so.
So for everyone who is listening to this, I've got a background in digital technology generally, but I've been involved in ministerial advisory for cybersecurity for some time through the CSAC. So this is the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So I'm thrilled to be able to ask someone else these leading questions and see what their thoughts are. And for everyone listening, you can pose questions to Nadia or I throughout via the Q&A function, and I will try and relay those during our talk, but we're only here for 45 minutes, so we might as well crack on. So first up, Nadia, we've got a new government, and the new Minister for Digital Technologies is the Minister for Science, Innovation and Technology is Judith Collins. If you were talking to her right now, what are the top 3 things she really needs to know?
I think what I would talk about is that we are seeing globally in Australia and New Zealand, just all around the place, this continual rise. We're seeing massive numbers coming out. Looking at CERT New Zealand's wrap up recently, they have noticed that they've seen a really slight decrease, an 8% decrease in reports that have come through to them, but they've seen $20 million worth in financial loss, which is an increase on all of the years before. So while we might be seeing smaller numbers, I think we can deduce that it means that the sophistication of the attacks is actually getting better. And we're seeing that across the board as well with ransomware and things like that. They're just getting better. They're finding new ways to put harder and more pressure on people that are affected. I think another comment that I'll probably make that we can get into as well is that, the global economy is not great. Organizations are certainly looking at belt tightening across the board, but it's not the time to start pulling money away from security. It's so important to keep investing and to keep pouring it in. If you pour a lot of money into security, it doesn't often come out with a tangible kind of thing that you can see when it's all going well. So it's easy to think that maybe it's not worth it, but it is. It's so important. And we see a lot of the organizations that I work with, their incidents come from cutbacks and setbacks and people putting shadow IT in because it's just too hard to get something across the board as part of a project or something like that. So those would be probably some of the key points that I would raise.
Yeah, it's really hard to get your head around when you don't work in this space, isn't it, as well? So hard for boards and governments and organizations to prioritize this kind of investment.
So, yeah, certainly. Sorry.
Yeah, carry on that thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, certainly one of the things that I've seen come out of some of our member organizations and organizations outside of that as well is with belt tightening at the moment. Some people have been saying that giving IT less. They're investing less in IT teams and things like that. And then they might be bolstering security. But I always thought, you know, IT and security are two sides of the same coin. So in this case, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. One of the best things you can do to help your security team is actually to keep your IT team afloat as well, and keep investing in them and things like that. It doesn't really work taking from one and giving to the other. It just makes everyone's lives a bit more challenging.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thank you for that. So let's talk a bit more about the government cyber system. And obviously you've worked for the CERT before, so we think, can't say I know. But if we contrast ourselves with Australia, we don't have a single agency or a dedicated minister like Australia does. And we certainly haven't got the kind of funding that Australia is throwing behind cybersecurity, which I'm sure you'll have quite a lot of insight into. There's been some recent tweaks here in Aotearoa, where like moving the CERT over to GCSB, but nothing substantial. So what do you make of all of this contrast between New Zealand and Australia?
It's very interesting. The Australians are certainly dealing with much bigger figures. You know, absolutely eye-watering numbers have gone into ACSCs in billions of dollars, and they're taking it. I hate the line, we take security seriously, but they're taking security seriously. And it's been fascinating. We're really lucky we get to work closely with the ACSC. They've made a real effort to start engaging a lot more with industry and with, you know, the people that they work to support and things like that. I was a little bit of a vocal challenger, I would say, not opponent, just challenger of the idea of merging CERT and NCSC. And my reason for that was not that I don't think it's a great idea. I just wanted to see it taken a step further, encompassing all of the agencies that are working for cybersecurity in New Zealand. I thought that it was a little bit of a halfway step. Regardless, it's happened. So I think we need to make the absolute best of it. But I'm hoping that it's just a step rather than the final the final outcome for this. So, you know, if we can look to integrate New Zealand Police, cybercrime in that as well, and DIA has different components that need to feed into that. It's a solution. It's an issue that spans the entire spectrum of industries and organizations. So I don't think we can just leave it up to certain NCSC. I think it needs to be a bit broader than that.
So putting you on the spot slightly, since you opened the door on that, and certainly I share your view that the model of bringing all of those functions, those fragmented pieces from all the different government agencies together into one focused place. Do you also agree with Australia boldly having a minister for cybersecurity and one minister who holds that portfolio?
I genuinely, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Cyclines, I think that I haven't seen the perfect model come out yet. You know, it's been really fragmented in New Zealand, and we've had lots of, even if you look at how many ministers there are for the Ministry of Education, for MBIE, it's quite complicated. There's a lot of people involved. I think having Minister O'Neill in Australia is probably a really, really good approach, and I do hope it works. She's implemented the Office of the Cybersecurity Coordinator, which runs through Department of Home Affairs. And that cybersecurity coordinator was supposed to sit kind of above industry and government and work as a really good liaison point. So whenever there is a major incident, they can say, okay, you know, there's this taking place with industry. What do we know? Who do we need to support? How can we get all the right people in the room? And in theory, it's supposed to take some of the burden and onus off the person that's experiencing the incident, so that they don't have to go and report it to 20 different agencies. You know, the cybersecurity coordinator can help them along the way with that as well. I think that's a wonderful model. We haven't really seen it tested in anger in a major incident yet. So this has happened after the big breaches in Australia, after Medibank and Optus and Latitude. But I think that they're headed absolutely in the right direction.
And looking across like our Five Eyes partners and other nations, are other nations investing more than we're investing, and have they also taken similar steps, or are we just somewhere on a spectrum, on a continuum?
I mean, I think it scales, to be honest, for how much we do have to spend on it and things like that. It was quite interesting. I had a chat with a representative from CISA recently, so the American, the US version of actually, I don't know exactly what they'd compare to, particularly the ACSC. But they have tens of thousands of employees. And I was talking to them about, how do you possibly scale? How do you talk across the agency about incidents that would be affecting different organizations? And they were saying that, they've got a huge budget, they've got a huge remit, they have to look after an absolutely massive country. That's really, really difficult. So I often thought that in New Zealand, one of our advantages is our size. And I think we probably don't have to spend as much to get the same amazing outcomes, because if we're being honest, we all know each other. We've all worked together. It's a small community. We know who to reach out to. And if we don't know exactly who to reach out to, the person sitting next to us probably does. I think that our size and our agility and our Kiwi attitude of just getting things done can make things a lot easier for us than maybe some of our bigger counterparts in Five Eyes.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. And yeah, just their scale, and we can learn from them too, can't we? Isn't that one of the benefits of the Five Eyes arrangement?
Certainly, but one of the things I always, I worked in CERT and NCSC and GCSB before that for about 10 years. And one of the comments that was constantly made was New Zealand's speed to get information out. We were usually the fastest. CERT does amazing work getting reports out quickly. And it's because, again, we don't have to go through 20 layers of hierarchy to get something signed. We can move a lot faster. And that's a really good contributor to the community as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sorry, I've gone completely off page from the questions. Told you I was going to ask you. So bottom line, with thinking about all of this before we change topics to my favourite topic, which is skills, are we as a nation on the right track to prepare ourselves for what's coming?
Do you know, that is such a hard question to answer with this change, the changes that we've had recently. Obviously, we've had a very recent change in government. Just before that, we've kind of completely changed the model of having the National Cybersecurity Centre and CERT as separate entities reporting to different ministers and different agencies. I certainly hope so. I think that if we keep going and keep looking at how our partners are doing it and taking some of the good lessons learned, then we are on the right track. I think that a lot of our partners have gone in quite hard with implementing legislation, and that hasn't necessarily, in regulations, that hasn't necessarily paid off for them. So I think we also need to have some honest conversations about, is it the right thing to do to implement that here? Is there a better model? Is there something different we could do? Right. But I think we just need to have those conversations, talk to them about how SOCI works, the legislation for critical infrastructure, look at their reflections from what took place with the recent telco outages with Optus even, and find out what could have, what sort of legislation they could have had in place, or what was there that could have helped get them back earlier than 14 hours. They lost 000 access for a good portion of that 14 hours, and I think we need to figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen here, but not with overwhelming regulation. It's very tricky.
It is. It's a really tricky space. So you open the door a little bit on the private sector as well, and everything I've asked you so far has been about government investment and legislation and the like. So in your experience at working with the private sector in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is private sector gearing up and preparing itself for the sophistication of the bad actors in the cyberspace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I work with a lot of Kiwi CISOs, a lot of New Zealand organisations, and some of them have a global footprint. And I'm consistently impressed with the conversations that they're having. Nice. And the effort and resources that they put in into cybersecurity. I do acknowledge that I exist a little bit in an echo chamber, because I think if you have a CISO in the first place, or a security team, something like that, you're probably, you're in a slightly different place to organisations that maybe aren't making those investments. But the conversations are consistently changing and evolving. They're looking at new threats. They're looking at what our counterparts are seeing overseas. One of the big things that's keeping a lot of them awake at the moment is third-party breaches. We've seen so many of the large incidents we've seen lately have come through third-party incidents. So a really good example is the HWL Ebsworth legal firm. They had a significant breach themselves, and even though so anyone that had information with them, anyone that they were representing in a legal case, even someone that was being challenged by HWL, was all of a sudden in the throes of an incident, but they didn't control it. They didn't have any ability to find out what information had been accessed because it wasn't their own incident, but they had to manage it like one. We're seeing more and more and more of these come through, and they're trying to figure out new ways to deal with to deal with those incidents that they don't control anymore.
Wow, yeah, and that's quite interesting. But you make a really good point that if you're large enough to have a SISO, then you're large enough to be investing. And there is, New Zealand is a nation of small to medium enterprises. So there are a lot of organisations that possibly aren't even thinking very hard about how they better protect themselves. And I guess that's what the cert exists for, isn't it? To help with that education and helping people when they do need to respond to something.
Absolutely. And one of the things that, CERT's wonderful at it. And they have a lot of information on their website for businesses of all sizes. And a lot of that information comes from looking at what the big organizations are doing and what challenges they're facing, and then trying to find ways to translate it into meaningful steps that businesses can take. It's hard to say to them, you need to go ahead and implement Australia's Essential 8. That would take their entire budget. But they can sort of say, well, two-factor and good passwords. It's simple, but it's a really good start. That sort of thing, I think.
Yeah. Hey, well, I'm going to move on to my favourite topic, which is talking about skills and talent. If anyone does have any questions for Nadia or I as we go, you're welcome to use the Q&A function. Type those in. So, Nadia, cyber skills are a really hot topic for our industry, digital technology industry. But they're really needed for everyone, right? Where do you think our focus here in Aotearoa should be on how to improve cyber skills generally for everyone, not just the people who work in the industry itself?
It's really interesting. I see a lot of really, really good work coming out of some of our big organizations like the banks in New Zealand and things like that. The work that they do around explaining to people why two-factor matters and why long and strong passwords matter, and the encouragement that they give people to do that across, all of their accounts. It's a really basic start, but I think it started the discussion about the basics of cybersecurity and why it matters. And it's going to continue to become more and more a part of our lives. And even the discussions I hear, I was talking to my mother-in-law this morning about scams around, scams around Christmas and things like that. They're just going to continue to become more and more of our daily lives. I think there's a lot of great organizations out there as well, like Rock Academy and things like that, starting with our schools, teaching kids early. I think it's just going to have to be big part of it. And I think the onus is also on us as IT professionals to spend that time with our families and be that person at the barbecue, Christmas, talking about cybersecurity skills. Outside of that, I'm obviously a huge advocate for diversity in the sector. And it's a buzzword. We all talk about it a lot, but I think diversity of background, diversity of thought, diversity of language abilities and all of that sort of thing is just so critically important. My personal background is Middle Eastern politics. I have an arts degree. I didn't come from a technical background. But someone said to me, when I was working, if you come and work with us, we'll put you on SANS courses, we'll teach you all about cybersecurity, but bring your background of being able to write reports and do presentations and things like that. And I've seen a lot of people in our industry pulled from different areas, pulled from comms and marketing and engagement and things like that. We can teach them cybersecurity and then they'll absolutely soar, and they'll add a really exciting dimension to the industry as well.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. So talking about our industry more specifically, and this whole cyber skills is, a real kind of hot topic. And I'm writing a blog series on getting started in different kinds of roles. If you were someone who was already working in digital tech or not working in digital tech and wanted to retrain in cybersecurity, do you have any advice for them on how to get started in this space? I know I'm putting you on the spot asking that question, but you talked about some courses before.
I absolutely couldn't specify any courses, but I would,
That's okay.
and I speak to, I've spoken to a few girls' high schools and things like that, and I've
Mm-hmm.
said, when you go to uni, do some tech papers, throw in some comp sci, like, even if it's not to do with what you're hoping to, to specialize in, it'll make your job easier. It'll make your life probably easier, having a better understanding of this sort of thing. So, yeah, I wouldn't be able to name anything, but I think getting into those courses, spending a bit of time doing it. I did SANS. SANS is wonderful, but I think they're about $10,000 a pop.
Eek. Yeah, not
Yeah.
great. So we've got a question from Raoul, who is someone hoping to transition from IT service delivery into cybersecurity. And he's wondering what strategies he can employ to showcase his abilities in cybersecurity and positioning cyber within an overall IT infrastructure environment. And he says, all while managing limited budgets effectively. So if you were wanting to transition and prove to your bosses that look, I've got this kind of capability, do you have any advice on what he could do?
Not a huge amount. I've had friends that have made similar transitions, going from, being a systems admin or being developers and things like that. They've all gone into work for SOCs in large organizations. So, I'm just going to name names, places like the banks and Datacom and places like that have quite wonderful security operations centers. That was the next kind of step in the career that they made. And then from there, they pivoted into doing sort of more incident response focused roles. But that's probably my experience in that area.
Okay, good to know. I've heard from people, they think that cyber is a pretty boring, dry industry or segment of our industry to go into. What would you say to that?
It's not entirely unfair. Every job has its exciting days and its not exciting days, certainly. And I think working in SOCs is probably a pretty good example. If everything's going well, certainly it's all a little bit same. But as soon as there's an anomaly, it's something that you can dive into and you can get right into. And I think incident response is my background. Some people absolutely love it. They thrive in it. They like the chaos and the unpredictability and the pressure and the learning. Some people absolutely, fall apart as soon as those days hit. And I think this is not what I signed up for. I'm here to monitor access logs. Like, leave me alone. I think it's all very, very personality dependent. But my experience and the teams I've worked with, I think no 2 days ever looked the same in cybersecurity for us. Right. It was always evolving, always moving. There was always some disaster just down the pipeline that always arrives at 4:00 on a Friday. So I wouldn't call it boring, but I'm sure that there are some monotonous aspects to it.
And we're having this conversation a couple of weeks before Christmas. So obviously going on 2024. Which is going to shape up to be probably another challenging year with more technologies coming our way. Is there anything you're particularly looking out for next year in the cyberspace?
I mean, I think there's a lot of, this probably combines some of my backgrounds, but I think that we're seeing a huge shift in the geopolitical landscape at the moment, and that's really unpredictable. None of us know exactly where that's going to go. I think for me, what it's brought home is that things can change really, really quickly. So countries that we, maybe outsource to, maybe places that we keep our data centers, things like that, we've had a reasonably stable patch globally. I don't know if that's going to continue. No one does, of course, but it has made some of our members start questioning whether they need to look at better redundancy, better, keeping things, data sovereignty and things like that as well. So I think that that's going to be, geopolitical tensions are going to be an interesting theme of next year. So we'll see what happens there. Third-party supplier breaches as well. I think that's probably going to continue to be a massive, massive incident. And it can be really, really difficult and really challenging, because sometimes trying to get information out of organizations that have been breached, trying to get them to tell you what's happened, really difficult. Sometimes they just say nothing's happened. Like, well, I can see the data on the dark web. It has. It's, those sorts of incidents are really tricky to manage. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens in that space going forward as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating year, and probably another challenging year after we've had all these COVID challenging years, and yeah, as you say, the geopolitics, which based on what you said you studied, I'm sure you're finding fascinating at the moment. And it's quite challenging sitting here in Aotearoa because we feel quite distant often from what's really going on and where the real trends are being developed, don't we? It can feel quite isolating here.
Absolutely. And normally, we say cybersecurity is a global issue with local implications. When the Ukraine tensions started earlier this year, we were really prepared, and Australia was really prepared to see quite a lot of impact from that. And we ended up, for a lot of organizations, there was absolutely nothing. It hasn't been the kind of fireworks spectacular that we imagined. But I've been speaking to counterparts in Europe and Latvia and places like that, and they're saying that they're under constant attack, constant DDoS, constant, so they've felt that. And I thought that was quite unusual. For me, it was unusual because I've sort of always believed that these things just happened on the internet to everyone. But I think, yeah, there are definitely more localized trends that we haven't really been affected by yet. Hopefully not. But
and have you got, I didn't prep you for this question in any way, it wasn't on my list of potential topics, but have you got any thoughts or concerns around generative AI and large language models and the rate that they've been developing and the potential impact that they could also be having from an attacks basis?
A lot of concerns. From a tax point of view, of course, any automation in the space is going to be something you have to defend against. So it's just going to mean more money, more resources, more technology, more of this arms race to be able to defend against. I think that is going to be a little bit more challenging. I'm also quite concerned about the push towards AI for what it means for customers and users of services. So right now, we use chatbots and things to interact with our airlines and our banks and things. There's only certain answers that those bots can give us. They're kind of limited in what they are able to share. I think with generative AI, things like that, they can go off script a little bit more. We've seen a lot of examples in the international community of them just giving wrong information. ChatGPT sometimes just lies. So I think one of the concerns is going to be the accuracy of information that we're getting and the reliability of it. I had a fascinating conversation with some of our CISOs recently talking about this, and they were saying, are they legally going to have to make it clear when you're interacting with a website that you are speaking to a generative AI rather than a person, and that you can't actually necessarily follow steps that this robot's told you to take because it doesn't understand their policy? It's a can of worms. It's going to be interesting.
But then I guess the other side of the coin is hopefully part of the response and the technologies that are developed to protect us can also be leveraging this technology, right?
Well, that's absolutely it. And we've got, we're seeing a couple of companies absolutely take over in this space. So Microsoft, Google, CrowdStrike, all of the big names, it's likely that they're developing what they do as quickly or faster than the attackers. And hopefully that we end up with some more protections around that. Looking at, and there's a very tricky thing to protect against specifically, but looking at Australia's cybersecurity strategy for this year to 2030, I believe, a lot of the things that they talk about are putting in national defences and having, better gateways and things like that. So they are putting a lot of effort and thought into trying to figure out how to plan for the future and how to protect against the nasties that it might have in it. Those are all conversations that New Zealand, I think, needs to start having as well. I certainly don't have the answers, but there's some very, very clever people. There's a wonderful team at Callaghan Innovation that specialise in generative AI as well. I got to sit down with them a while ago. It was absolutely fascinating asking them what they think is coming.
Right. Oh wow, it'd be great if I can hook into them and get them to share some of this more broadly. That'd be fantastic. So I'm going to change topics again now. You made the comment before that it's incumbent on all of us as IT professionals to be that person at the barbecue and to be talking about things. So what are the 3 things that you think everyone should be sharing with their whānau, with their grandmas, with their with their loved ones, with their children, for example. I know you've got younger children. What should children be learning as well?
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. My kids are almost 4 and 6, and they're, I've noticed they've started exploring the smart TV options and what they can find and things like that. And it's quite horrifying to see how many clicks away they are from like kind of kids gambling isn't the right word, but those sorts of sites that really, it's not many clicks at all. They're very good at finding them. I think that I would say to people that it's just important to stop and take a breather when you're doing things online. Sometimes things feel a little bit fishy, but you're just trying to move quickly because, I don't know, I got a message the other day saying that my Netflix account hadn't been paid, like my credit card bounced or something. And I went to pay it. I was just in a hurry. I was just moving quickly. It looked legitimate. And I thought it's entirely possible something went wrong with my credit card. And so I went to pay it. And then I thought it just felt a little bit off. And then when I thought about it later, when I went back to it half an hour later, I remembered that my Netflix bill actually goes to a different email account. So it was a scam. And I almost gave my credit card away to someone. If I let that pressure get on top of me, I would have done it, I think. So just taking a moment when something feels a little bit off, or when you have to make a big payment or give your information away, just make sure that it still feels comfortable a few minutes later. Maybe you'll decide to open it up on your browser instead of looking at it on your phone. I can't possibly advocate for good passwords enough. When I was at CERT, so many of the incidents were because people have the same password for everything. I was at McDonald's a while ago and someone was saying that they just loudly announcing that they have used the same password for everything since Bebo. I thought, well, it's amazing. I thought it's amazing you haven't been compromised yet. And I thought you probably are. Like, there's probably a group of people reading your emails at the moment. I don't even know how you do that. So there's advocating for changing passwords. Long, strong, and unique. Use a password manager. It's a pain, but it's better than it's better than losing access to your precious memories, your photos, your emails, your whole online life. And two-factor authentication, again, just making sure that it's rolled across every app that you possibly can. I get messages every now and then saying it's blocked people from logging into my Instagram and my Facebook. It does its job. It's important. So I will advocate endlessly for those 3 things, I think.
Yeah. Steve has asked a question on the chat about grandmas and in-laws when you are at that Christmas Day barbecue. And what's a good conversation opener? How do we kind of go, hey, grandma, you need to start thinking about whether your passwords are complex enough and not written down as a sticky note stuck to your screen kind of thing.
Oh, it's hard. And I think my grandma just refused to use a phone. So I probably never had to have that conversation. But it's certainly tricky. And I think it's, one of the things that I've been saying, I don't know if this is the best or not, I don't have all the answers, is, gone are the days of someone running past and pulling your handbag off your shoulder to get your wallet when you're walking down the street. Now people are trying to get your money in these ways. And it's not like that they'll do it because of ways that we've made it easy. So not having two-factor, it makes it easy for them. Not having good, long, strong passwords does make it easy for them. The sticky note's not amazing, but if they absolutely have to write them down in a notebook or something that they keep in a drawer, it's better than nothing. Sticky notes are a bit obvious, and we see them all the time come up in photos that people take. But a notebook kept in a drawer or something like that in a wardrobe. But yeah, they are really complex discussions to have. I think working at CERT, I saw the financial loss and I heard the stories, and it's so devastating and it's so heartbreaking. Those are people's life savings. That's everything. And it's just gone because, someone stole someone's password and it's all over. So
yeah, and then you hear these heartbreaking stories about romance scams and people being conned out of their life savings and those scenarios as well, and it really is tragic. So I think, yeah, you make a really good point. Just keep having the conversations and bringing these up and describing that this stuff is real. I remember when I was doing some 6 years ago now, I used to run these workshops for politicians at the Beehive on new and interesting concepts in digital technology. And I remember one of the speakers that we had come and speak about cybersecurity back then talked about how and the analogy you just used reminded me of this, talked about how gone are the days where those who want to attack us maliciously are turning up via boats in our waters or landing in aeroplanes, and changing that mindset from, as you say, the person grabbing the handbag, which is a very physical thing that everyone can relate to the mindset of this predator who's very who's in a foreign place. You don't know where they are. You've got no way of tracking them down or contacting them. It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, there's and this is almost no recourse. I think actually you've just reminded me about something else we used to run into at CERT all the time as well. So sometimes we get scammed. Happens to the best of us, right? What my boss said to me the other day, even good drivers have bad days, and I liked that. It does happen. Something I used to see at CERT was people were so embarrassed that they dragged their feet on reporting it. They didn't want to share it. Maybe they weren't ready to admit it themselves, for whatever reason. I don't know. But if you report fast, CERT New Zealand, the police, the banks, they all work really closely together, and quite often you can actually get that money turned around. And I think CERT put stats in their report about how much how much financially they managed to get turned around from the scammers because people reported within 24, 48, 72 hours. After that 72-hour window, I believe it's just gone. But, within that, you've got a little bit of time to act. So I think, saying that it also does happen. People get scammed. It happens all the time. One of my credit cards just got blocked because I probably put it in some rubbish website and someone took my details and used it to buy something on Amazon that they shouldn't have. Admitting that it happens, and it's really common, and it's important to speak up when it does, just in case you can get it back. That's really, I think, we had some cases where it was hundreds of thousands of dollars we managed to turn around.
Wow.
And thought, if you just waited one more day, if you were just quiet for one more day, we're gone. So
yeah, wow, thanks. That's really good advice for everyone. So last thing before we wrap, tell us a little bit more about CISO Lens, who you work for.
Oh, right. So we work for, our members are generally ASX or NZX listed or government, big organisations. It's a vendor-free zone as well, which is, obviously we are vendors, so it's a little bit, but we've set it up like that so everyone in the community can get together and have a big old complain about whatever they're dealing with, whatever challenges they're having, and they don't have to worry about getting sort of sales calls afterwards or anything like that. And then as a community, we can go out and kind of get the information of who we should be working with together and stuff as well. We share information, we work together, we put out alerts about what we're all seeing and what's going on. I think, for a lot of organizations, they might compete in one way or another, similar industries and things like that. But in cybersecurity, there is no competition, right? If someone in your industry gets compromised, you're not better off, you're worse off. It's terrible for all of us. So working together to lift the tide across the board in Australia and New Zealand is absolutely in everyone's best interests. So that's our goal and our mission at CISO Lens.
That's great. Well, thanks, Nadia, for your time today. That was a really interesting conversation. Thank you for being a ring-in at short notice as well. And it sounds like you and I should pick up a conversation after this about collaborating on some things together. I think both our memberships could work well.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone that attended for your time. I've really enjoyed this.